The conference room fell silent when Vanessa Vaughn raised her hand and said the four words that made CEO Roman Jacobs stop mid-sentence. That strategy is wrong. Roman had been presenting the quarterly expansion plan to the board of directors and senior management of Jacobs' Hospitality Group, the luxury hotel empire he had built from the ground up over the past 12 years. 27 hotels across 15 states, each one a destination in itself, known for impeccable service and attention to detail that bordered on obsessive. He was 34 years old, worth somewhere north of $800 million according to the latest Forbes estimate, and he had not gotten there by being wrong about business strategy. He turned slowly from the projection screen displaying his carefully researched market analysis and locked eyes with the young woman sitting 3 seats down on the left side of the mahogany table. Vanessa Vaughn, the new director of guest experience, who had been hired just 6 weeks ago. She was 28, with dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, sharp green eyes, and an expression that showed absolutely no fear despite having just contradicted her boss in front of 18 other people. "I am sorry. Could you repeat that?" Roman asked, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made several people shift uncomfortably in their chairs. Vanessa did not flinch. "The expansion strategy you are proposing, opening 3 new hotels in the Pacific Northwest within 18 months. It is financially sound on paper, but it is operationally flawed. We cannot maintain our service standards with that aggressive timeline, and if we compromise on what makes us different from every other luxury hotel chain, we will damage the brand irreparably." The silence in the room became oppressive. Roman could feel every eye bouncing between him and this woman who had just challenged him in the most public way possible. His CFO, Martin, looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. His VP of Operations, Sandra, was staring at Vanessa with a mixture of horror and grudging respect. Roman set down the presentation remote with deliberate care. "Our research shows that the Pacific Northwest market is underserved in the ultra-luxury segment. We have the capital, we have identified the properties, and we have the demand. What exactly do you think I am missing?" "Staff training," Vanessa said immediately, sitting forward in her chair. "Your timeline allocates 8 weeks for hiring and training staff at each new location. That might work for a mid-tier hotel, but our properties pride themselves on staff who know regular guests by name, who remember dietary restrictions and room preferences, who can recommend the perfect local restaurant for any occasion. That level of service cannot be trained in 8 weeks. It takes 6 months minimum, and that is if you are hiring experienced hospitality professionals, which you will not find enough of in those markets to staff 3 hotels simultaneously." Roman felt something unexpected stirring in his chest. It was not anger, though part of him wanted it to be. It was something closer to intrigue, mixed with a reluctant admiration. "Go on," he said. Vanessa glanced at the projection screen, then back at him. "Your market research is correct. There is demand. But you are approaching this like a real estate investment, not a hospitality expansion. If we open 3 hotels that do not meet our standards because we rushed the process, we will get bad reviews, lose customer trust, and spend years trying to recover our reputation in that region. Instead, we should open 1 hotel with our full attention, get it running at our standard level, then use that trained staff as a core team to help open the next location 6 months later. It will take longer, cost more in the short term, but protect everything you have built." The room remained silent. Roman could see the calculations happening behind several sets of eyes around the table. Martin was nodding slightly despite himself. Sandra had pulled out her tablet and was already making notes. Roman walked back to his seat at the head of the table and sat down, never breaking eye contact with Vanessa. "You have been here 6 weeks. How do you know our training timeline?" "Because I spent my first 3 weeks visiting 6 of our properties and sitting in on training sessions. I talked to staff at every level. I reviewed our training materials, our onboarding process, and our retention data. Then I compared it to industry standards and our closest competitors. We are exceptional at creating an exceptional experience, but it is because we invest more time in our people than anyone else. That is not something you can shortcut without consequences." Roman leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. She was right. He knew she was right. He had been so focused on the financial opportunity, on the market analysis and the property acquisitions, that he had defaulted to industry-standard timelines without considering what made his company different. He looked around the table. "Anyone have anything to add to what Miss Vaughn just said?" Sandra raised her hand tentatively. "She is right about the staffing challenges. I flagged it in my initial review but noted we could make the timeline work with some creative solutions. But honestly, those solutions involved compromising on experience requirements and reducing the training period. I was uncomfortable with it, but the numbers worked." Martin cleared his throat. "From a financial perspective, staggering the openings would actually improve our risk profile. Lower immediate capital outlay, better cash flow management, and if Miss Vaughn is correct about the reputation risk, that has significant long-term financial implications." Roman felt the shift in the room. Vanessa had not just disagreed with him. She had been completely, demonstrably correct, and now everyone knew it. He stood up again, and this time when he looked at Vanessa, there was no edge in his expression. "Thank you for your insight, Miss Vaughn. You are absolutely right. Martin, Sandra, can you two work with Miss Vaughn to revise the expansion timeline based on her recommendations? I want a new proposal by the end of next week." He looked around the room. "Does anyone else have concerns they have been sitting on because they seemed counterintuitive to the plan?" That opened the floodgates. 3 other people raised issues they had been quietly worried about, and the meeting turned into an actual collaborative discussion instead of a presentation. By the time everyone filed out 90 minutes later, they had a completely different strategy that felt infinitely more solid than what Roman had walked in with. Vanessa was gathering her notes when Roman approached her. Up close, he noticed details he had missed from across the room. A small scar above her left eyebrow, the fact that her business suit was high quality but not designer, well-maintained but not new, the absence of expensive jewelry except for a simple watch that looked like it had sentimental value. "That took courage," he said quietly. She looked up at him, and for the first time he saw a flicker of nervousness in her expression. "I almost did not say anything, but I kept thinking about what it would feel like to be a guest at one of those hotels if they were not up to our standards. I would be disappointed. And disappointed guests do not come back." "How did you end up in hospitality?" Roman asked, surprising himself with the personal question. "My mom was a housekeeper at a hotel in Phoenix. Not a nice one, just a regular chain hotel off the highway, but she took so much pride in her work. She would tell me stories about the little things she did to make guests smile. Leaving origami animals made from towels for kids. Remembering that the businessman in 304 liked extra coffee packets. She made minimum wage and never got promoted, but she understood something fundamental about this industry. People remember how you make them feel. When she died 6 years ago, I was working in marketing for a tech company. I quit and went back to school for hospitality management because I wanted to work somewhere that valued what she valued." Roman felt something crack open in his chest. He had built this company on numbers and strategy and calculated risks. But the reason it succeeded, the reason guests paid premium prices to stay at his hotels, was because of people like Vanessa's mother. People who understood that hospitality was not a transaction but a relationship. "I am sorry about your mother," he said. "Thank you." Vanessa finished packing her bag. "I hope I did not overstep too badly in there. I know contradicting the CEO in front of the board is probably not great for job security." "You did not overstep. You did your job. I hired you to be director of guest experience, not to agree with everything I say." He paused. "Though I will admit it has been a long time since anyone challenged me that directly." "Maybe they should more often," Vanessa said, then immediately looked like she regretted it. "Sorry, that was honest." Roman found himself almost smiling, which was unusual. He was not known for smiling much at work. "You are probably right about that too." She looked at him for a moment, something unreadable crossing her face, then nodded and headed for the door. Roman watched her go, aware that something had shifted in the room beyond just the business strategy. Over the next week, Roman found himself paying attention to Vanessa in ways that had nothing to do with the expansion proposal. He noticed that she arrived at the office before almost everyone else, usually around 6:30 in the morning. He noticed that she spent more time talking to the front-line staff than she did with other senior managers. He noticed that when she presented the revised expansion plan with Martin and Sandra, every detail was thoroughly researched, every assumption backed up with data, every risk clearly identified and mitigated. The revised plan was brilliant. Staggered openings, intensive training programs, a mentorship system pairing experienced staff with new hires, detailed quality control checkpoints. It would take 3 years instead of 18 months, but by the end of it, they would have 3 hotels that genuinely met their standards. Roman approved it immediately and told Martin to allocate whatever budget Vanessa needed. He also started finding excuses to talk to her. At first, it was purely professional. Questions about implementation details, requests for clarification on training protocols, discussions about guest feedback systems. But somehow those conversations kept extending beyond the immediate topic. He learned that she had a younger brother who was a teacher in Colorado, that she loved hiking and spent most weekends exploring trails around Seattle, that she was terrible at cooking but kept trying anyway because she refused to be someone who only ate takeout. He told her things too, though he was less practiced at personal conversation. About growing up in a working-class family in Ohio, watching his parents work multiple jobs to keep the family afloat. About his first job at 16, cleaning rooms at a Holiday Inn, where he had been simultaneously appalled by how poorly the place was managed and fascinated by the hospitality industry. About dropping out of college after a year to work full-time, learning everything he could, saving every penny, until he could buy his first property at 25. A rundown motel that he renovated and transformed into a boutique hotel that became the foundation of his empire. "So you have been in hotels since you were 16, Vanessa said one evening when they were both working late, reviewing guest satisfaction surveys in the conference room. "That is 18 years. When do you take time for yourself?" Roman looked up from the spreadsheet on his laptop. "I take time. When was your last vacation?" He thought about it. "I visited our property in San Diego 3 months ago. That is not a vacation. That is a business trip." "I went to the beach," he offered. "For how long?" "About 20 minutes before a conference call." Vanessa shook her head, but she was almost smiling. "You need a life outside of work." "I could say the same to you. You are here at 7:30 at night." "That is fair," she admitted. "But I at least have hobbies. When was the last time you did something just for fun? Roman genuinely could not remember. Work had consumed his life for so long that he had forgotten there was supposed to be anything else. I like my work, he said, and it was true, but even to his own ears it sounded hollow. I like my work too, Vanessa said. But my mom used to tell me that if you do not live your life, you have nothing real to bring to your work. She meant it for herself, how her life experience made her better at connecting with guests. But I think it applies more broadly. How can we create meaningful experiences for other people if we are not having our own meaningful experiences? She was right, of course. She was right about a lot of things Roman was discovering. It was simultaneously frustrating and exhilarating. You want to get dinner? He heard himself ask, the words escaping before he had fully thought them through. Vanessa looked surprised. Like right now, unless you have other plans. She studied him for a moment, and Roman felt uncharacteristically nervous. Is this a work dinner or a personal dinner? Which one do you want it to be? He asked, meeting her eyes. That is not an answer. Neither is your response. They looked at each other, and then Vanessa laughed. It was the first time he had heard her really laugh, and the sound did something strange to his heartbeat. Fine. Personal dinner, but somewhere casual. I am not dressed for anything fancy. They ended up at a Thai restaurant 3 blocks from the office, sitting in a booth with mismatched chairs and string lights overhead. Roman could not remember the last time he had been somewhere so unpretentious. Vanessa ordered for both of them, speaking enough Thai to the waitress to get recommendations, and when the food arrived, it was spectacularly good. How do you know Thai? Roman asked. I dated a guy in grad school whose family was from Thailand. They basically adopted me for the 2 years we were together. Taught me to cook, taught me the language, treated me like family. When we broke up, it was amicable. We both knew we were better as friends, but I stayed close with his family for a while. Eventually drifted apart when I moved for work, but I still remember the language and the recipes, even if I cannot execute them properly. Why did you break up? Vanessa shrugged. We loved each other, but we were not in love. There is a difference. We were good companions, good friends. We had fun together. But there was never that spark, that feeling of not being able to imagine your life without the other person. We were both smart enough to recognize that before we wasted more time. That is remarkably mature, Roman said. Have you ever been in love? Vanessa asked, then immediately waved her hand. Sorry, that is too personal. No, it is fine. The honest answer is I do not know. I thought I was once. When I was 26, right after I bought my first property. Her name was Claire. She was smart, beautiful, ambitious. We were together for almost 3 years. I thought we would get married. What happened? She wanted someone who could be present, who would prioritize her sometimes, and I was completely consumed with building the business. 80-hour weeks, constant travel, every conversation eventually circling back to work. She tried to be patient, tried to be supportive, but eventually, she realized that she would always come second to the company. She left, and I was devastated for about 2 months, and then I threw myself even harder into work and forgot about it. Did you forget about it, or did you bury it? Vanessa asked gently. Roman sat back, the question hitting harder than expected. Maybe a little of both. They talked for 2 more hours, until the restaurant staff started giving them pointed looks, and they realized they were the last customers. Roman paid the check, and they walked back toward the office where both their cars were parked. Thank you for dinner, Vanessa said when they reached her car, a 10-year-old Honda that was clean but showing its age. Thank you for the company, Roman replied, and for challenging me last week. That was a turning point, I think. Good turning point or bad turning point? I will let you know. Vanessa smiled, unlocking her car. Good night, Roman. He watched her drive away, standing in the parking garage longer than necessary, trying to identify the feeling spreading through his chest. It took him until he was driving home to his empty penthouse apartment to name it possibility. The next several weeks fell into a rhythm. They worked together frequently on the expansion project, but they also started having lunch together occasionally. Always somewhere casual, always conversations that ranged far beyond work. Roman learned that Vanessa was afraid of flying but did it anyway because she refused to let fear limit her experiences. That her favorite book was East of Eden because it was about people choosing to be good despite their circumstances. That she could name every tree native to the Pacific Northwest and got genuinely excited about plant identification. He told her about his complicated relationship with his parents, who were proud of his success but uncomfortable with his wealth. As if the money had created a distance between them, he did not know how to bridge. About the loneliness that came with being at the top, where every relationship felt potentially transactional. About the fear that if he stopped working, stopped building, stopped achieving, there would be nothing else left of him. That is not true, Vanessa said firmly. They were having lunch at a Vietnamese sandwich shop, and she pointed at him with half a banh mi. You are not just your work. You are thoughtful, you listen, you care about getting things right. You have a dry sense of humor that catches people off guard. You are generous, even though you try to hide it behind business justifications. Those things exist independent of your company. How do you know I am generous, please? I have seen how you interact with staff. You know names, ask about their families, remember personal details. Last week, you personally approved an emergency advance for a housekeeper whose daughter needed medical care. You told Martin to make it a grant, not a loan, so she would not have to pay it back. And you did it quietly, without making a big deal of it, because you did not want praise. That is generosity. Roman felt exposed and seen in equal measure. I thought I was subtle about that. You were, but I pay attention. Their eyes met across the small table and Roman felt the air change. There was something building between them, something that had started with professional respect and had grown into genuine friendship, and was now threatening to become something else entirely. He wanted to reach across the table and take her hand. Wanted to tell her that she had become the best part of his day. Wanted to kiss her right there in the sandwich shop with fluorescent lights overhead and Vietnamese pop music playing in the background. Instead, he said, we should get back to the office. Vanessa nodded, but there was something in her expression that made him think she had felt it too. The moment he had been halfway dreading and halfway anticipating came 3 weeks later. The board meeting where they would do the final presentation on the revised expansion plan and officially launch implementation. Vanessa was nervous in a way he had never seen her before, double-checking her notes, running through her portion of the presentation repeatedly. You are going to be great, Roman told her in the hallway before they entered the conference room. These are the board members, people who have decades of experience. What if they think my approach is naive? Then they would be wrong. Your approach is thoughtful and strategic and based on what actually makes this company successful. Trust yourself. She took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, let's do this. The presentation was flawless. Martin covered the financials, Sandra covered operations, and Vanessa covered the guest experience strategy. She spoke with confidence and clarity, backing up every point with research and data, but also with heart. She talked about what made their hotels special, about the importance of authentic hospitality, about building a culture where staff felt valued and empowered to create memorable experiences. When she finished, the board chair, a woman named Patricia who had been in hospitality for 40 years, smiled broadly. "Miss Vaughn, that is the best presentation on guest experience strategy I have seen in my entire career. You have taken what could have been a risky expansion and turned it into a genuine opportunity to strengthen our brand. Well done." The board approved the plan unanimously. After everyone left, Patricia pulled Roman aside. "Where did you find her?" "Recruiting firm. She came from a competitor. Do whatever you need to do to keep her. That woman understands hospitality in a way most people never will. She is going to be running her own company someday, so you better hope it is this one." Roman felt a sharp twist of something that might have been possessiveness or pride or fear. "I will keep that in mind." They celebrated that evening, the whole senior team going out to a nice dinner at a steakhouse downtown. Roman found himself seated next to Vanessa, hyper-aware of every time their arms brushed, every time she leaned close to be heard over the noise of the restaurant. Sandra, who was slightly tipsy on expensive wine, leaned across the table. "You two would be cute together." Roman froze. Vanessa nearly choked on her water. "What?" Sandra looked between them, then had the grace to look embarrassed. "Oh God, was that inappropriate? That was inappropriate." "I am sorry. Forget I said anything." But the words hung in the air, impossible to ignore. When dinner ended and people started heading home, Roman walked Vanessa to her car. "Sorry about Sandra," he said. "She meant well. It is fine." Vanessa unlocked her car but did not get in. "Roman, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What is this?" "Between us, I mean. Because sometimes it feels like friendship and sometimes it feels like something more, and I do not know if I am imagining that or if you feel it too." Roman's heart was pounding. This was the moment. He could deflect, keep things professional, maintain the safe distance he had perfected over years of putting work first. Or he could tell the truth. "You are not imagining it," he said quietly. "I feel it too. I have been feeling it since the day you disagreed with me in that meeting and were completely right. Maybe even because you disagreed with me and were completely right." Vanessa laughed softly. "That is a weird thing to be attracted to. Is it? You were brave and smart, and you cared more about doing the right thing than about office politics or your own career safety. How could I not be attracted to that?" She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something light and clean. "I have been trying to talk myself out of this. You are my boss. It is complicated. There are all kinds of reasons why this could be a terrible idea. I know. I have been running through the same list. But I cannot stop thinking about you," she continued, "and not just about work. I think about whether you are eating properly or getting enough sleep. I think about making you laugh because your whole face changes when you laugh. I think about what it would be like to kiss you." Roman reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hand. "I think about that too, constantly. So what do we do? I do not know, but I think we should figure it out together." He kissed her then, soft and careful, a question as much as a statement. She kissed him back, her hand coming up to rest on his chest, and Roman felt the last of his careful walls crumble completely. When they pulled apart, Vanessa was smiling. "That was a good start to figuring it out." "I have to be careful about this," Roman said seriously. "I do not want you to ever feel like your job is contingent on a relationship with me, or that you cannot disagree with me professionally because of personal feelings. The thing I respect most about you is your integrity. I will not compromise that. I appreciate that. And for the record, I am still going to disagree with you when you are wrong. Good. Do not ever stop." They talked for another hour, leaning against her car in the parking garage, figuring out boundaries and parameters. They would be discreet at the office but honest. They would not let personal feelings interfere with professional decisions. If at any point it became problematic, they would address it head-on rather than letting it fester. This is very mature and reasonable, Vanessa said eventually. Is that a bad thing? No, it is just funny. I have never started a relationship by negotiating terms. We can be spontaneous too, Roman protested. Oh really? When? Right now, come home with me. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. That is your idea of spontaneous. I am a work in progress. She laughed and kissed him again. I should go home, but ask me on a proper date this weekend. Somewhere neither of us has to think about work. Deal. Their first date was a hike up Rattlesnake Ledge, followed by a late lunch at a small cafe in North Bend. Roman could not remember the last time he had spent an entire Saturday doing something that had nothing to do with work, and it felt strange and wonderful and slightly terrifying. Vanessa talked about her childhood in Arizona, moving around a lot because her mom took jobs wherever she could find them. Never having much money, but never feeling poor because her mom was so good at making every place feel like home. Her decision to go to college on scholarships and student loans, determined to have more financial stability than her mom had. I do not need to be rich, she said as they sat on a bench overlooking the lake. But I never want to be one missed paycheck away from disaster. I saw what that stress did to my mom. I want security. That makes sense, Roman said. I think that is why I have such a hard time stepping away from work. Growing up the way I did, there was always this feeling of instability, like everything could disappear at any moment. Building the company, accumulating wealth, it is not about the money itself. It is about never feeling that vulnerable again. But you are not vulnerable anymore, Vanessa pointed out gently. You have more than enough. When is it enough to let yourself relax? It was a question Roman had never really confronted. I do not know, maybe never, or maybe I just need someone to remind me that there is more to life than work. I can do that, Vanessa said, but you have to actually listen. I will try. They fell into a relationship that felt surprisingly natural despite the initial complications. At work, they maintained professional boundaries, though Roman suspected people were catching on. At Martin's knowing look when Roman approved Vanessa's budget request without his usual detailed questions. At Sandra mentioning that Roman seemed happier lately. At the receptionist's barely concealed smile when Roman and Vanessa left together one evening. But outside of work, they built something entirely separate. Weekend hikes became a regular thing. Cooking experiments at Vanessa's apartment that usually ended with ordering takeout because her cooking really was terrible. Long drives with no destination, just music and conversation and the simple pleasure of each other's company. Roman learned what it felt like to be prioritized by someone else. Vanessa remembered details about his life, asked about his brother who he rarely talked to, encouraged him to call his parents more often. She challenged him in ways that made him better, calling him out when he was being stubborn or short-sighted, celebrating his successes without needing credit for her contributions. He fell in love gradually, and then all at once, like walking down a gentle slope that suddenly became a cliff. He realized it one night at her apartment, watching her dance around the kitchen while cooking pasta, singing along badly to the music playing from her phone. She was wearing old sweatpants and one of his dress shirts that she had stolen, and she was completely unself-conscious, just existing in her space, and Roman thought, I want this forever. What? She asked, catching him staring. I love you, he said. Vanessa stopped dancing. The pasta spoon was still in her hand, tomato sauce dripping onto the floor. You what? I love you. I have been trying to figure out when to say it, trying to find the perfect moment, but then I realize this is the perfect moment. You here just being yourself. I love you. She set down the spoon carefully and walked over to him. I love you too. I have been in love with you since you let me completely restructure your expansion plan and did not make it about ego. I know that is a weird moment, but it is when I knew." Roman pulled her into his lap, not caring about the tomato sauce on her hands, and kissed her thoroughly. "We are both weird then. Good. I would not want to be normal with you." 6 months into their relationship, things at work got complicated. Not because of their relationship, but because the company hit a rough patch. One of their flagship hotels in Boston had a major incident, a guest falling in a stairwell and getting seriously injured. The guest was suing. The story made national news, and suddenly they were facing a PR crisis that threatened the whole brand. Roman went into crisis mode, working 18-hour days, snapping at people, making decisions without consultation. Vanessa tried to help, but he shut her out, falling back into old patterns of handling everything himself. It came to a head 2 weeks into the crisis. Roman was in his office at midnight, reviewing legal documents when Vanessa walked in without knocking. "You need to go home," she said. "I am busy." "You are spiraling. You have been here since 6 this morning. You have not eaten anything except coffee and whatever Martin brought you at lunch. You are not sleeping. You are not thinking clearly, and you are pushing away everyone trying to help you." "I am handling it," Roman said shortly. "No, you are drowning in it, and you are too proud to admit you need help." Vanessa walked over and physically closed his laptop. "The incident in Boston was not your fault. The hotel followed all safety protocols. The guest was intoxicated and ignored signage. Our lawyers say we have a strong defense. But you are acting like the entire company is your personal responsibility, and any problem is a personal failure. It is my company. It is a company you built with hundreds of employees who are committed to its success. Let them help you. Let me help you." Roman wanted to argue, but he was exhausted, and she was right. He was handling this the same way he handled everything, by taking it all on himself, and it was not sustainable. "I do not know how to not do this," he admitted quietly. "This is who I have always been, the person who works harder than everyone else, who takes responsibility for everything." "I know, but that person is going to burn out, and then what? You cannot run a company from a hospital bed when you have a stress-induced heart attack at 40. The blunt words shook him. "That is dark. It is realistic. Roman, I love you. I love your dedication and your work ethic and your commitment to excellence. But I also need you to be healthy and happy and present, not just for me, for yourself." He pulled her close, burying his face in her shoulder. "I am sorry. I have been a terrible partner the last 2 weeks. You have been scared and stressed. That is human, but you shut me out, and that is not okay. We are supposed to be in this together, remember, together." "Right." He pulled back to look at her. "Okay, help me figure this out." They spent the next 3 hours working through everything together. Vanessa brought perspective that Roman had lost in his panic. The situation was bad but manageable. They needed to be transparent, compassionate, and proactive. She drafted a statement that struck the right tone, suggested bringing in a crisis management consultant, and recommended personal outreach to their loyal guests to reassure them. By the time they left the office at 3 in the morning, Roman felt like he could breathe again. The crisis resolved over the following month. The guests' lawsuit was settled out of court with a reasonable agreement. They implemented new safety measures across all properties, not because they were required to, but because it was the right thing to do. The media moved on to other stories. Business recovered, and Roman learned something crucial. Letting people in did not make him weaker. It made him stronger. He proposed on a Saturday afternoon 6 months later during a hike up Mount C. Not at the summit where it would be crowded and expected, but at a quiet spot halfway up where they had stopped to rest, sitting on a log overlooking the valley. I have been thinking about what you said about meaningful experiences, Roman said, pulling out the ring he had been carrying for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. About how if we do not live our life, we have nothing real to bring to our work. You have taught me how to live, Vanessa. How to be present, how to let people in, how to value things that cannot be measured in profit margins or quarterly reports. I love you, and I want to spend my life having meaningful experiences with you. Will you marry me? Vanessa was crying, which he had expected, but also laughing. That is the most business-adjacent proposal I have ever heard of. Is that a yes? Yes, you ridiculous man. Of course it is a yes. The ring fit perfectly, a simple emerald-cut diamond on a platinum band. Roman had worked with a jeweler for weeks to get it exactly right, elegant and understated, like Vanessa herself. They got married 8 months later in a small ceremony in the San Juan Islands. Just close family and friends, nothing extravagant. Vanessa's brother walked her down the aisle. Roman's parents cried through the whole ceremony. Patricia from the board gave a toast at dinner that was equal parts heartfelt and hilarious. I told Roman to do whatever it took to keep you at the company, Patricia said, raising her glass. I did not mean marry you, but I suppose that works too. Everyone laughed, including Vanessa, who later told Roman it was the best wedding toast she had ever heard. Their honeymoon was 3 weeks in New Zealand, hiking and exploring and completely disconnecting from work. Roman turned off his phone for the first time in 15 years. It was terrifying for about 2 days, and then it was liberating. The company did not collapse without me, he said with wonder as they sat on a beach watching the sunset. Shocking, Vanessa replied dryly. It is almost like you hired competent people who can do their jobs. I am learning. When they returned, Roman made changes. He promoted Sandra to Chief Operating Officer, giving her more autonomy over day-to-day operations. He hired a president to handle things he had always insisted on doing himself. He set boundaries around his time, leaving the office at reasonable hours, taking weekends off, actually using his vacation days. It was uncomfortable at first, letting go of that level of control, but the company thrived. Turns out that trusting talented people to do their jobs was good business strategy. Vanessa got promoted to Vice President of Guest Experience, overseeing the implementation of the expansion plan she had designed. The first Pacific Northwest property opened 18 months after that fateful board meeting, and it was flawless. Every review praised the exceptional service, the attention to detail, the feeling that the staff genuinely cared about guests' experiences. You were right, Roman told her at the opening reception. About all of it. I know, Vanessa said, grinning, but it is nice to hear you say it. 2 years into their marriage, they bought a house outside the city with a big backyard and mountain views. Vanessa immediately started planning a garden. Roman built her a greenhouse and discovered that he liked working with his hands, creating something tangible outside of business deals and strategy meetings. They talked about kids. Vanessa wanted them. Roman was nervous but willing. They decided to wait another year, to settle into the house and their routines, to make sure their relationship was solid before adding that complexity. Are you happy? Vanessa asked him one Sunday morning. They were having coffee on the back deck, watching birds at the feeder she had installed. Roman thought about it seriously. For most of his life, he would not have known how to answer that question. Happiness had seemed like an indulgence, something other people pursued while he focused on success and security. But now, sitting next to his wife in a home they had built together, with a career that still challenged him but no longer consumed him, with a life that extended beyond work, the answer was clear. Yes, he said. I am really happy. Good, me too. They had their first child 3 years into their marriage, a daughter they named Alina. Roman had never been more terrified than the moment the nurse handed him that tiny, perfect human who was now his responsibility. But Vanessa was calm and capable, and together they figured it out. Alina was followed by a son, Marcus. 2 years later, the house filled with noise and chaos and exhaustion and joy. Roman learned to function on less sleep, to make decisions with a baby strapped to his chest, to find profound meaning in tiny milestones like first steps and first words. He also learned that Vanessa had been right all along. Having a life outside of work made him better at work. Having real experiences gave him perspective on creating meaningful experiences for others. Having love and family and purpose beyond profit margins made him a more complete person and a more effective leader. On their 10-year anniversary, they went back to that Thai restaurant where they had their first not-date date. It was still there, still unpretentious, still serving spectacular food. "You remember what you asked me that night?" Roman asked as they waited for their food. "I asked you a lot of things. I asked you a lot of things in general. You asked if I had ever been in love, and I said I did not know. I remember. You told me about Claire. I realize now that I had never been in love before you. I had no idea what it was supposed to feel like. The complete certainty that this person is my person. The way loving you makes me want to be better, not because you demand it, but because you deserve it. The way we challenge each other and support each other and make each other laugh, that is love. Everything before you was just practice." Vanessa reached across the table and took his hand. "You know what I think about sometimes? That if I had not spoken up in that board meeting, if I had just let you present your flawed strategy because I was too intimidated to challenge the CEO, we might never have gotten here. That moment of courage changed my entire life. Mine too. You disagreed with me in front of everyone and were completely correct, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So you are saying you like being proven wrong, only by you, and even then, only sometimes." She laughed, and Roman thought about all the moments that had led them here. The meetings and presentations and late nights at the office. The first time he realized she made him feel something beyond professional respect. The hikes and dinners and quiet mornings. The proposal and the wedding and the births of their children. Every choice and challenge and celebration that had built their life together. The food arrived, and they talked about their kids and upcoming expansion projects, and whether they should take a family trip that summer. Normal, everyday conversation between two people who had built something extraordinary out of mutual respect, intellectual challenge, and deep, abiding love. Later that night, after they had driven home and paid the babysitter and checked on their sleeping children, Roman and Vanessa stood in their bedroom preparing for sleep. It was not glamorous or romantic, just the ordinary rhythm of a long marriage. But as Roman watched his wife move through her nighttime routine, he felt the same wonder he had felt that night in her apartment when he first said he loved her. "Thank you," he said suddenly. Vanessa turned from the bathroom, toothbrush in hand. "For what?" "For being brave enough to disagree with me, for pushing me to be better, for teaching me what actually matters, for choosing me over and over again." She walked over and kissed him, toothpaste and all. "You chose me too. That is how this works. Best decision I ever made." "Second best," she corrected. "The best decision you ever made was listening when I told you that you were wrong." Roman laughed and pulled her close. "Fair enough. I will try to keep doing that. You better. I have at least 40 more years of being right ahead of me. I am counting on it." They stood there in their bedroom in the house they had chosen together, holding each other in the comfortable silence of two people who did not need to fill every moment with words. Outside, the wind moved through the trees they had planted. Down the hall, their children slept peacefully. Around them was the life they had built from that single moment of courage and honesty. She had disagreed with him in front of everyone and been completely correct. And in doing so, she had given him everything he never knew he needed. A partner who challenged him. A love that made him better. A life that extended beyond boardrooms and profit margins into something infinitely more valuable. Roman had spent the first 34 years of his life building an empire. But the real achievement, the thing he was most proud of, was what he had built with Vanessa. A marriage based on honesty and respect. A family filled with love and laughter. A life that was actually worth living, not just working through. He had been the CEO who thought he had all the answers. She had been the woman brave enough to tell him he was wrong. And together, they had created something neither of them could have built alone. Something that would last far longer than any business success or financial achievement. They climbed into bed, fitting together the way they had learned over 10 years of practice. Vanessa's head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, their legs tangled together. Perfect, ordinary theirs. "I love you," Roman said into the darkness. "I love you too," Vanessa replied, already half asleep. "Even when you are wrong. Especially when I am wrong," he corrected. Her soft laugh was the last thing he heard before sleep claimed them both, and Roman drifted off thinking that being proven wrong had never felt so much like winning. Because he had won, in the ways that actually mattered. He had found someone who saw him completely and loved him anyway. Someone who made him want to be more than just successful. Someone who had turned his careful, calculated life into an adventure. She had been the one from the moment she spoke up in that conference room. He had just been smart enough to recognize it, to choose love over pride, to build something real instead of just building something big. And every day since then had been proof that the best things in life come not from being right, but from being open to being wrong, to changing, to growing with someone who challenges you to be your best self. The CEO had thought he knew everything. The woman who disagreed with him had taught him what actually mattered. And together, they lived happily ever after in the truest, most earned sense of those words.